Hello, I'm Esme Murphy and welcome to Talking Points. Marijuana became legal in Minnesota on August 1st, 2023. For law enforcement, arresting someone for driving high on weed is more complicated than arresting someone who is driving under the influence of alcohol. Marijuana was legalized for use in Minnesota on August 1st, 2023. A year-long Minnesota pilot program using mouth swab testing found that 87% of drivers who were pulled over and tested for driving under the influence of drugs had at least one drug in their system. One of the most common drugs found, marijuana. But that test is not admissible in court. A 2024 survey from AAA found that nearly 85% of pot users say they drove the same day as they used, and 53% say they used within an hour or less of driving. And while the Minnesota State Patrol found there were more than 8,000 drug-impaired driving arrests between 2013 and 2017, that figure actually jumped to more than 15,000 from 2018 to 2022. There are no Minnesota statistics yet for the period after August 1st, 2023, when marijuana was legalized. To find out how Minnesota law enforcement is handling driving while high, I went to the agency that deals with this every single day, the Minnesota State Patrol. And joining me right now is Sergeant Tyler Meless from the Minnesota State Patrol. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, let me ask you, why aren't there statistics yet?
It's an ever-changing law. A few years back when we started, it was legalized with just edibles. And then when commercial legalization took place, it is now currently just on Native American reservations. So we are still awaiting the full commercialization of legalization.
So it's still changing and evolving?
Every day.
Okay, every day.
The time.
And, you know, before this interview, I asked you about a law that went into effect in 2024 about the fact that just odor alone of marijuana could not be the reason for a search of a vehicle. You say it's more complicated than that.
It is very complicated and very circumstantial. It differs if it's burnt odor versus raw cannabis odor, and also what are the purposes of that odor? Are they legal? Is the product in the proper container? Is it stowed in a proper area of the vehicle? Or are we dealing with something a little more serious where the person may be impaired?
Now, that's an interesting point. So if you are driving and you have marijuana, which is legal to use, can you just have it on the front seat next to you, lying out?
The only way that could be possible is if it was in the sealed original container from the dispensary.
So it has to be sealed or put away somewhere that's locked up, like a glove compartment?
Not even the glove compartment. Our law is very clear. If it is not in the original container or if it's been opened, it has to be in the trunk or furthest most back area of the car.
Okay. Do people know this? I mean, are you must be pulling people over who have it out in not the proper stored container.
Yeah, a lot of what we do is educating the public on that. So some of these laws, they came very fast. They are confusing. So that is part of our job as well.
Okay, so do you automatically cite someone if they've got it?
Again, that's very circumstantial.
Okay.
Not necessarily, but it's possible.
Okay. And you mentioned the odor of burnt marijuana versus non-burnt marijuana. Obviously, if it's burnt, it means that it's been used recently.
It depends. It just means that it's been used at some point.
Okay. Now, you have been doing a mouth swab test pilot program for the past year. And that has come out, you've been able to find that 87% of those that you tested who you were suspecting of driving under the influence of drugs had at least one drug in their system. And that means they had more than one drug. And you say that's what's common. Yeah,
when somebody's using something other than alcohol, when there's another substance, it's actually more common to have more than one substance in their system.
Okay. Now, the mouth swab was able to detect marijuana. There is a specific threshold that you look for in these blood tests, and is it also in the mouth swab that you look for?
Yeah, so when we're talking about the oral fluid, each device has a cutoff limit. The oral fluid devices only test for delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the active ingredient in cannabis.
And why is it important to test for delta-9?
Again, delta-9 is the primary ingredient in cannabis. That is what causes impairment.
That's what causes impairment. So if you see delta-9, you know that that's a problem. Somebody's driving under the influence.
It could be.
Or it could be. And then it can't be used in a court of law, but you can get that as a search warrant for a blood test. And that's actually the same as drunk driving, right?
Correct, yeah. If there is suspected products or substances other than alcohol, law enforcement would apply for a search warrant and obtain a blood or urine sample from that driver.
Okay. Going back to that AAA survey, 53% of those surveyed by AAA say they used within the hour. What are your thoughts about that?
I think people aren't aware or maybe need a little bit more educating on how long it stays in your system and the impact it can have. My opinion on that is that people just don't know. People just don't know.
Well, you know, and one of the things, in the days when they tested for marijuana consumption in order to get a job, some people came back positive after having used it weeks ago. But this 0.9 that you're talking about allows you to figure out approximately, roughly when it was used, or if it's a level of impairment, right?
Yeah, the delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, we call it delta 9 THC. When we get a blood sample, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension can actually break that blood down, and it shows delta 9 THC and then 2 metabolites. There's one metabolite called carboxy THC, and that's the one substance that stays in your body for several weeks. Okay. Now, with that metabolite, it does not cause impairment.
Okay. You've got obviously a very difficult job. You're in the line of danger. You're on the state highways. You're pulling people over. This sounds really complicated.
Yeah, it can be. One of the things we have to do is train officers and train the public. We have to work together to ensure that everyone on our roadways are driving safely.
And that's so interesting, training the public. What would you like the public to know? You've already discussed some of the things, but go over all the things that you'd like the public to know.
Yeah, the first thing is be in tune with your body. If you feel different, you're going to drive different. Always plan for a safe ride. It doesn't matter what substance you are using, if it's alcohol or if it's cannabis or prescription medications. Plan a sober ride if you feel different. And then the other thing is say something. If you see it, say it. If somebody's about to get in a car and you're concerned about their sobriety, say something and stop them before it's too late.
Okay, because theoretically, if they are under the influence, they are pulled over, they are tested, they could come back with that 0.9 or higher threshold, which would mean they are impaired.
The delta 9.
Delta 9.
There's
yes.
a lot that goes into it, and that's just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay. So what are the things that users of cannabis, which obviously it's legal, what are the things they should do if they're going to use cannabis, if they're going to drive with cannabis, if they're going to the cabin and have cannabis for the weekend? What should they be doing?
The first thing I would say is do your research. Make sure you are looking into the products that you're about to use, that you understand how much THC you are intaking. And then also be in tune with your body. Again, if you feel different, you drive different. So make sure you do a head-to-toe check. Make sure that you're with somebody that you feel comfortable would stop you from driving impaired.
Okay, and then it's in the proper container. When you're out on the road, is there a difference between the way somebody who is impaired from marijuana drives versus somebody who's impaired from alcohol?
Yes, there's a whole bunch of different things that change. Yes. Cannabis is very confusing in a sense that it has different strains and it does not act the same from person to person. It actually gets stored in the body fat, so it's very person dependent.
Okay. What are some of the examples that you say you can look at a car and say there's a good chance they're driving impaired on marijuana?
There's a whole wide range of things, but speeding, weaving, not using turn signals, things like that. Kind of the same concept as when we're looking for alcohol impaired drivers to begin with.
Okay. And in terms of people being pulled over, obviously that's a very difficult situation that you're in, but do people understand that they can't be driving high? I mean, obviously some people have to, but
I think some do know that, but I think there's a large majority that probably don't.
And how much training do you folks get? I mean, literally between knowing the odor of burnt marijuana versus not burnt, but just all of these things. How much training does the average officer get? Because it's complicated, and it sounds like even laws are changing around, or the interpretation of laws, I guess is a better way to put it, are changing.
Yeah, to begin with, we get a lot. We get trained in standardized field sobriety testing, and then we also get trained in advanced roadside impaired driving enforcement training. It's a mouthful. That actually looks at drug impairment a little bit deeper. As far as the normal road officer, it's a constant training that happens day in and day out because, like you said, the laws are ever changing.
Okay, and what is the piece, can you just give me an example of a piece in the training where it would lean towards the drug impaired? What to look for?
Yeah, so that advanced roadside impaired driving enforcement training is focused on drug impairment. So that's when they go through their standardized field sobriety testing the same way they would with alcohol, but they get to that point where they maybe give a preliminary breath test and it's zeros or it's not consistent with the impairment they're seeing. Then the officer would have to dig a little bit deeper and find what's going on with that individual.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much. We really appreciate all that you do and all that the State Patrol does. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Esme.
All right. Well, that does it for this edition of Talking Points. As always, feel free to email me with comments and suggestions at esme@cbs.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO News.